I thought there were a couple of things that play in this debate. The one is I think that the negative is able to get a lot of ground in this debate with sort of the lack of discussion about their alternative. I'm not saying they get a lot of mileage out of we solve kind of all of the problems of the world, but they are certainly able to, with an idea of releasement, avoid all potential problems or assertions of technological thinking and that the style of thinking that Heidegger is criticizing. And I think that that is a pretty serious concession for you not to discuss the either ethical or ontological ramifications of the alternative. If we simply say we're going to release from the world and to not discuss what that means or how one does that or what that one does that in the context. And so that's kind of one area that is a huge potential form of offense I felt the affirmative could have garnished. I think there is one overarching argument, which is the question of technological thinking being a form of thinking that guarantees environmental destruction. And while I think the 2AR attempt at saying, hey, they dropped the disadd link turn, but then getting to the K and saying they never applied their security link, I don't know. That's just like, they never said we engaged in security, but I'm going to use a security description, and they never called this security. I don't know what else you'd call it, man. I mean, that's one of those, in that situation, you should either decide we're going to win, security is something that we want to avoid, or you're going to say there's no link to this security argument. Okay? And I felt like the tight wire act in the 2AR just lacked any form of credibility. It'd be one thing if like if they applied the security argument to disease later on in the debate, but it's a freaking, I mean, if you're right, the 1AR description, this is about international relations theory, and then you go to the K and you're like, the security link does not apply because it's not assuming human-to-human interaction. It's like what you just described on the disadd was exactly what you said they needed to do to link. But regardless, I think that there is a link to the question of technology. I think that that does answer the question and the way that they've advanced it in this debate about whether or not technology makes your advantages inevitable. And I don't think that there's a defense, very strong defense, certainly in the 1AR or the 2AR, about there's always value to a breathing body. And I feel like that had there been greater discussion of there's always a value to life, preserve life in every instance. You can't tell the Holocaust survivor that their life is now meaningless, right? You can't tell somebody who's gone through a true experience of loss of being that they, you know, should no longer exist or be counted. And I think that what you can say is that it is important to recognize that when someone is experiencing disease that is a particular form, we have no choice but to make a technological decision. And the alternative of sitting around is, you know, although Heidegger as a Nazi is not a good argument, the potential argument that Heidegger's position allows for Nazism does answer the question of whether or not you act in the face of atrocity. And I think that that's probably a better stance in this debate than I felt like kind of some form of a middle ground that just didn't directly engage the question, is technological thinking good or bad? And they seem to clearly say you are that and that is bad. And in this debate, you all kind of danced and said, well, our particular instance is good, but didn't really address why technological thinking makes the ultimate impact that you describe inevitable. Does that make sense? I think that this was both a 2AC and a 1AR, both some of the arguments that were not made, like there's always a value to life, I think needs to start in every Heidegger 2AC, especially given what your 1AC said. And then there always needs to be a question of whether or not the alternative can truly address the ends it seeks to. And then the 1AR needed to say this BizCon DA does not have a link. We're begging you to go for it. And we're going to go for, you know, 4.5 minutes of answering the K. I felt like kick one of your advantages, only defense, This is a prime case. You kick one of the advantages, go for the other, beg them to go for the BizCon DA, then make the 2NR's job a lot harder. I felt like this was like a red flag. The links in the 2NC to that dissent were horrible. No offense, Brian, but like, I felt like the way in which Dylan explained them, it was like, you affect 9 industries. I have no reason why those 9 industries are critical to the economy. And then, like, there's some sort of goal area. There's lots of investment opportunity. Well, yeah. So what? They don't invest in CAFOs. They invest in something else. There was no spillover argument that I could trace.
One more question. You said we didn't really get any kind of read until I we all saw. Why didn't the science release or singularity?
I think that this was the other argument I felt like you needed to make in the debate. You needed to advance the claim that the descriptions that they made in the debate were ones that were profoundly calculative thinking. Okay, and so if they're responsible for their descriptions and you're responsible for your descriptions of your advantage, then they are responsible for those as well. If they are not responsible, then you can say all of the links to our 1AC advantages are not things we need to defend. We just need to defend the plan. The plan is actually an attempt to open ourselves up to a world without control over subsidies. And so to answer your question about whether or not the alt, I don't even know what your argument is, I guess is the easy answer to that question. I feel like, yes, science singularly has a potential productive impact, but their response was technological thinking still allows the very process for the disease to flourish in the first place. And so the question of whether or not science was a particular good begged the question of whether or not science can prevent disease. Right? And their argument was technological thinking causes us to put things together that scientifically produce a disease. Right? The AF advantage, the foundation of the harm. And I felt like that was a massive area where the negative did not do as good a job as you could have done and said, look, environmental destruction, here is the technological thinking that happens. And make the connection between the inevitability on the case and the technological thinking on the case. I'll shut up and let Jackie talk.